I remember the first time I started noticing the little things that didn't quite add up. Jessica and I had been together for a few months, and everything felt smooth. We'd spend evenings talking about our hopes, our pasts, and just laughing over dinner. But there were these subtle moments, things that didn't make sense, little cracks in the picture of perfection we'd built. It started with her conversations at the diner, where she worked. On several occasions, while talking to her coworkers, Jessica would mention someone, just offhand, like a fleeting thought. I'd overhear fragments of sentences. "Oh, that reminds me of David," or "I used to do that with him." But whenever I'd ask her directly, her response would be vague. "It's nothing," she'd say, brushing it off with a smile. "Just someone from my past, you know." I never thought much of it though. People have histories, and I wasn't one to pry. But then I began to notice something else. Her phone. She was constantly putting it down face down when I was around, making sure it was always within arm's reach. I had never thought twice about it before, but I began catching her acting strange when messages came in, a brief glance of concern flashing across her face. I'd ask her who it was, and she'd just tell me it was nothing important. The more she brushed it off, the more curious I became. Then one evening, I heard her talking to one of her friends at the restaurant, a casual chat as they cleaned up after hours. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I overheard them talking about David again. This time it wasn't casual, it was different. "I don't know why you don't just call him back," her coworker had said. "He's always asking about you, sending you stuff. It's like he can't let go." My heart sank as I tried to piece things together in my head. David, she never mentioned how serious this person was, just that he was a part of her past. But hearing how much she was still connected to him, how she was still talking to him, something wasn't adding up. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than she was letting on. So I asked her, "Who's this David guy? The one who keeps sending you gifts and asking about you?" I saw her eyes widen for just a second, just enough for me to notice before she quickly recovered. "David?" she asked, a slight falter in her voice. "Oh, he's nothing. Just a guy I used to know. Nothing serious." But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and I knew then that she wasn't being honest with me. It wasn't until I did some digging that I began to realize how much Jessica had been hiding. I found an old letter from David that had been tucked away in her drawer, a letter that mentioned how much he missed her and how he couldn't wait to see her again. It was clear, from the way it was written, that their relationship had been more than just a fling. The pieces started to fall into place. Jessica wasn't just hiding her past from me. She was hiding the fact that she still had feelings for this man. And the worst part, she had been lying to me about it all along. I couldn't shake the realization that the person I thought I knew so well was nothing like I imagined. She had been keeping secrets, using her past to manipulate the present. And I had been too blind to see it, until now. It hurt, more than I could have imagined. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. The person I trusted, the person I loved, was someone else entirely. It all started with little things I couldn't ignore. Jessica's tone had changed, but I told myself it was just work stress. She was busy, we didn't have as much time together, and I kept trying to make things feel normal, even when I could sense her pulling away. It wasn't until I noticed the first odd thing that I started to question my assumptions. One evening, I went to grab a drink from the fridge, and as I walked by, I saw Jessica's phone on the coffee table. It buzzed with a new message. My heart skipped as I saw the name. David. I had never heard her mention anyone named David since we started dating, so I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a coincidence. But then the next few days, I saw more and more of his name pop up in conversations. When I asked her about him, Jessica would dodge the question, dismissing him as someone from the past. But then one evening, I overheard a conversation at the restaurant. Jessica was sitting with a few of her coworkers, laughing, and they mentioned something about David's weekend plans in passing. I froze when I heard it. David again. I leaned against the kitchen counter, pretending to clean, but I couldn't get the name out of my head. I felt sick. This wasn't just someone from her past. Something more was going on. A few days later, I got my first real glimpse of the truth. I wasn't snooping, I swear. But I accidentally glanced at her phone again when she left it behind to go to the bathroom. This time the screen wasn't locked. I saw a text from David that made my blood run cold. It read, "We'll meet tomorrow to finalize everything. Don't worry about Marcus. I'll handle him." The words hit me hard. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't innocent. This wasn't just a past relationship being rekindled. There was something more. Something dangerous. I tried to stay calm, but I had to know more. That night, I stayed up long after Jessica fell asleep, scrolling through her email. I wasn't proud of what I did, but I had to understand. And that's when I found the worst of it. There were emails between Jessica and David, discussing an investment opportunity. It wasn't even an investment, it was a scam. David had set up this fake real estate deal, and he was trying to get me involved, making me a partner without my knowledge. He'd made plans to meet me about it in the next few weeks. And Jessica, she was right there with him, helping him set it up. She was in on it. I could barely breathe when I read the final message. "Once we've got Marcus involved, the money's ours. I'll deal with the rest." It all clicked in that moment. Jessica hadn't just been cheating on me emotionally. She had been part of a plot to take advantage of me financially, using our relationship as leverage. She'd lied to me, played me, all while I trusted her with everything. The next day, I talked to Timothy, our family lawyer. He had been working with me and my family for years, so I didn't think twice when I went to him for advice. He had started noticing something off with Jessica's actions too, and when I told him everything, he confirmed it. Jessica had been hiding more than I realized. She was part of a scheme. David had manipulated her, and now I was caught in the middle. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was all a plan to take me down. I was drowning in this new reality, but I couldn't ignore the facts anymore. Jessica had been playing me from the start. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, was not who I thought she was. Everything had fallen apart, and there was no going back. I was still reeling from the news of my father's death when the first hint that something was wrong began to show itself. It was subtle at first: Jessica acting distant, avoiding eye contact, and focusing more on her phone than on anything happening around her. The days following the funeral felt like a blur, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I noticed how she seemed unusually concerned with the details of my father's will, almost as if she were more involved than anyone else. She kept bringing it up, asking questions that seemed irrelevant to someone just grieving. At first, I thought maybe she was just trying to keep things running smoothly, but the odd questions began to raise my suspicion. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table when I overheard Jessica and Rachel talking. It wasn't a loud conversation, but I could hear snippets enough to make my heart stop. They were talking about changes to the will, and the tone in Jessica's voice sounded too assured, too confident. "Once we get the signatures, it'll be easy to change the documents," that Jessica said. My blood ran cold. I wasn't sure what they were referring to, but I knew this wasn't something that should be happening behind my back. I pretended to be absorbed in a task, but my mind was racing. I had to know more. The next day, I took a risk. Jessica had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the bathroom. I knew it was a violation of trust, but I had to see what was really going on. I unlocked it and went straight to her email. There it was, the email chain between Jessica and Rachel, planning how they would finalize the will to ensure Jessica's financial security. The subject line, "Refinalizing the will," made my stomach drop. The message was clear. Jessica and Rachel were discussing how to forge my father's signature, make it look like he had altered the will, and ensure that Jessica would inherit the bulk of the estate. They even talked about how they'd get me involved in the financial mess, making it harder for me to escape if I didn't comply. I felt sick to my core. My whole world turned upside down in an instant. I had been so blind. Jessica, the woman I loved, was involved in a scheme to take everything from me. I couldn't understand how someone I trusted could betray me like this. But it didn't end there. I called Timothy, the family lawyer, and explained my suspicions. He took me seriously, but he also told me he needed to look into it discreetly. He didn't want to tip anyone off. A few days later, he called me with the news that made my stomach churn. "Marcus, the will you were shown. It's a fake," he said. "The signatures aren't right, and I've confirmed with the bank that the documents were tampered with." Timothy didn't stop there. He had quietly been gathering evidence, taking notes of everything, and he'd even caught Rachel and Jessica exchanging more emails about the scheme. The deeper we dug, the more we realized how extensive their plan had been. Jessica had played me for a fool, all while making me believe she was the loving, caring partner I thought I had. The betrayal was more than emotional. It was a calculated, cold attempt to strip me of everything I had left. I felt like I didn't even know who she was anymore. And now, with Timothy's help, I had the proof to bring everything to light. The more I uncovered about Jessica's involvement in this betrayal, the clearer it became that I wasn't just dealing with a woman who had fallen out of love. No, this was much darker. After my father's sudden death, everything started to fall apart, and Jessica's behavior became more erratic. At first, I thought she was just grieving in her own way. But there were these small, unsettling things that didn't make sense. She would avoid talking about the inheritance, always changing the subject when I brought it up, even though we had discussed it in detail before. I began to notice she was spending more time with Rachel, her friend who had always seemed harmless enough. But now, I was beginning to see a different side of her. Then one day, I walked into the living room to find Jessica and Rachel whispering in hushed tones. The moment they saw me, they fell silent, and it sent a chill down my spine. They were hiding something, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the target of whatever it was. A few weeks later, the truth came crashing down. Timothy, the family lawyer, who had worked with my father for years, called me in to go over some of the documents related to my father's will. "Marcus, we have a serious problem," he said, his voice steady but with an unmistakable edge of concern. "The will you were shown isn't the one your father had planned. Someone altered it, and not in a way that benefits you." My stomach dropped. At first I couldn't believe it. I had trusted Jessica, and the thought that she had been behind this was unfathomable. But Timothy didn't stop there. As he dug deeper into the paperwork, he found inconsistencies in the signatures and the way certain clauses were worded. It was clear now, Jessica and Rachel had forged a will, manipulating the legal documents to try to steal everything from me. But there was more. Timothy wasn't just uncovering fraudulent paperwork. He discovered that Jessica and Rachel had been in contact with a group of local lawyers. They had been working with them to forge documents in favor of David, the wealthy man from Jessica's past. This wasn't just about manipulating my father's will. This was about taking control of everything I had. David, I learned, had been plotting to get rid of me, using Jessica to do his bidding. It was a sickening realization, but I couldn't deny it. I had heard whispers from Timothy about David's involvement before, but now I had the proof. In court, the situation escalated. Jessica's defense attorney tried to turn the tables on me. He insinuated that I was somehow responsible for the mess, that my character had changed after my father's death. He painted me as unstable, unreliable. But Timothy wasn't going to let that narrative stick. "Marcus's change in behavior is a result of betrayal, not guilt," he argued, pointing to the clear evidence of Jessica's manipulation. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. I had never imagined my life would spiral to this point, fighting not just for my inheritance, but for my own reputation. And as much as I wanted to fight back, the weight of Jessica's betrayal still clung to me. The evidence was overwhelming, but the emotional toll was far worse. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about everything I thought I had built with the woman I loved. But as each revelation came to light, it became harder to deny Jessica had been playing me all along, and the damage was done. I remember the moment everything changed. It was just before the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky, when I stumbled upon it. The truth, I had been piecing together little oddities in Jessica's behavior for weeks, things I could never quite explain, but this was undeniable. I found the email by accident. I was trying to unlock her phone, something I had never done before, but the opportunity presented itself, and my curiosity got the best of me. There, in plain view, was an email exchange between her and Rachel, talking about changes to my father's will. They mentioned forged signatures, tampered documents, and how they planned to make everything look legitimate. The mention of David's name in connection with this only confirmed what I had feared but couldn't bring myself to acknowledge. I wasn't sure what to do with this information at first. My stomach was in knots, but I knew I had to confront Jessica, no matter how much it hurt. So I gathered my evidence, printed out the emails, the bank transactions, and the forged will documents I had found in her drawer. I waited for the right moment, And when it came, I didn't waste any time. I walked straight into the living room, where she and Rachel were sitting, laughing, as if nothing in the world was wrong. I laid everything out on the table. The look on Jessica's face as her eyes scanned the papers was one of pure shock, as if she couldn't believe I had found out. But there was no hiding it. "Jessica, Rachel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "What the hell is all this? Tell me what's going on." At first Jessica didn't respond. She looked at Rachel, then at me, then back at the papers in front of her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to go this far, Marcus." She looked down, her hands trembling. "But we needed the money, all right. David promised me everything. He said we could start over, live the life we'd always wanted, but only if we made sure you were out of the picture." I could barely process what she was saying. My mind was racing. You did this because of money?" The words felt foreign, like I couldn't even wrap my head around the betrayal. "I didn't want to hurt you," she pleaded. "I swear I didn't. But David, he pushed me into it. It wasn't supposed to go this far. We were just going to tweak a few things, make it all look real." And then, out of nowhere, Rachel spoke up. "I didn't want any of this. Jessica, you pushed me into it. I didn't know it would end like this." She was nearly in tears. But I wasn't done yet. I turned to face Timothy, who had been standing silently at the back of the room. He was my family's lawyer, the man I had trusted more than anyone. But now, standing there, I realized he knew more than he let on. "Timothy," I said, my voice thick with disbelief, "you knew about this, didn't you?" He didn't answer at first. His gaze flickered briefly to Jessica, then back to me. Finally, he nodded. "I did. I saw the signs. I couldn't intervene directly. I thought it was better if you saw it for yourself." It hit me like a ton of bricks. All this time he had known. He had been watching, letting everything unfold as I struggled with the chaos. "You let this happen?" My voice broke. "I didn't want to hurt you, Marcus. I thought it would be better if you found out on your own." In that moment, everything I had ever believed in, the trust I had in these people, crumbled. Jessica, Rachel, Timothy, they had all played a part in the destruction of my life. But it wasn't just the betrayal that stung the most. It was the realization that for so long, I had been blind to the truth. Every moment, every argument, every doubt, it was all leading to this. The perfect storm of lies and manipulation. I remember the day everything started unraveling, like it was yesterday. Jessica and Rachel had been acting differently, and I couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at me that something was off. At first, it was subtle, a missed phone call from Jessica, a slightly nervous glance when I asked about her day. But I dismissed it too, consumed with work and the sudden pressures of managing my father's estate after his unexpected passing. Then it happened. One evening, after a long day at the garage, I decided to grab Jessica's phone, intending to text her something sweet. What I found instead was a thread of messages that chilled me to the core. Jessica had been in constant contact with David, the man from her past, the one I knew so little about. But it wasn't just personal messages, it was business. David was planning something, and it didn't take me long to realize that I was at the center of it. He was trying to get me involved in an investment deal that seemed too good to be true, a partnership that would have left me financially ruined. The worst part, Jessica knew about it, and she was helping him. I confronted her that night, my voice shaking with disbelief. "What is this?" I demanded, showing her the messages. Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. But then came the twist. She didn't deny it. Instead, she tried to justify it. "I had no choice," she admitted. "David, he said we needed this. We needed money, Marcus. He promised me everything, if I just helped him with this. I didn't want to hurt you, but I was too afraid of what would happen if I didn't." Her words were like daggers. I felt betrayed, not just by her actions, but by her confession. She wasn't just hiding things from me. She was actively working against me, using me to further someone else's plans. But the true scale of the betrayal didn't hit me until I spoke with Timothy. As the family lawyer, Timothy had always been someone I trusted. But when I mentioned the investment scheme and the involvement of Jessica and Rachel, his face went pale. "You're not the only one they've been manipulating," he said quietly. I've been digging into some of the documents your father left behind, and there's something wrong. The will, it's been tampered with. The news felt like a punch to the stomach. Timothy explained that Jessica and Rachel had forged parts of the will, trying to secure a large sum of money from the estate for themselves. They were planning to take advantage of my grief and confusion to steal what rightfully belonged to me. It was all part of a larger plan, one that involved David as the mastermind. The details Timothy uncovered were damning emails, phone records, even meetings that Rachel had attended under the guise of being a friend. It was like a web of lies, each thread leading back to the same people. As the weeks passed, I began to see the full extent of their deception. Timothy had been quietly gathering evidence, and one day he handed me a folder proof that Jessica and Rachel had been working with local lawyers to forge documents in favor of David. There were timestamps, altered files, and even evidence of payments to the lawyers involved. I felt my blood boil. The people I trusted had been playing me, using me as a pawn in their game. I confronted Jessica again, this time with the evidence in hand. "You thought I wouldn't find out," I said, my voice steady but full of rage. She didn't deny it. She simply stared at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. It was clear now, this wasn't just about money. This was about control, about power, and I had been nothing more than a means to an end.